Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Divorce-a-Palooza. So, when you were a kid, you probably remember your parents saying, well, life's not fair. And that actually is true in divorce, as you are probably realizing if you're newly separated or going through a divorce. What I want to talk about today is life's not fair as it pertains to your divorce and tips to dealing with life really not being fair. My guest is Leah Hadley, who is a CDFA and a divorce mediator and financial advisor. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks so much for having me.
Always love talking to you. You have such great advice. And I want to tell everyone who's watching that this conversation is based on the article you wrote, Life's Not Fair. That includes your divorce. So I don't want to take credit for that. So, when people go through a divorce, do you think that they are sort of it hits them at some point like, wow, this really isn't fair. I thought it was just, everything 50-50. And so, is there like a time during a divorce when somebody just says, wow, this isn't fair?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Jackie. When I sit down with a couple and we're talking about kind of what they're hoping to get from the mediation process, working through that, all the time I hear from people, I just want it to be fair. And fair is very, very difficult to define because fair is absolutely in the eye of the beholder. And so what might be fair to me may not be fair to you, right, Jackie? And so it really is a very challenging benchmark to live up to. And I think that most people at some point during the process feel like there is some piece of it that's not fair. So whether that,
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's so true. And it would be impossible for everything to be 100% fair. Think of all the intangibles. Is it fair that you sort of lived together and shared expenses for the last 10 years? How can you nickel and dime every single thing you ever did for each other? It's not fair maybe that somebody cheated. It's not fair that I changed every poopy diaper when my kids were born, like so it's so intangible that it would be impossible for it to be technically fair. But as a divorce mediator, tell me if I'm right, you try to get as close as possible.
Yeah, we really try to understand from each of the parties what does fair really mean to them, what kind of relationship they want the other party to have with their children. So not only the kind of relationship that they want to have with their children, what's most important to them in terms of dividing property. What does cash flow look like? So one may have a significantly higher income than the other, and kind of looking at the issues around spousal support are really tough. It's one of the hardest conversations that we have in mediation. And the person receiving it never feels like they're getting enough, and the person giving always feels like they're paying too much. And so really though, working to something that is agreeable. So it might not be quote fair, but it's something that we can come to terms with and we can live with.
And as a divorce mediator, I want to tell everybody watching that since I've known you for maybe a year or so, I feel like your strength is in coming to those resolutions in a divorce when it comes to finances and assets. Like that's really your strong suit
Exactly, absolutely.
because you're a financial planner and a CDFA.
Right.
Okay, so good to know because there's people listening who might have a complex financial situation. You would be a good fit for them. And I want to
Exactly.
tell people watching that Leah mediates all over the country, and you can find her at intentionaldivorcesolutions.com. Okay, what are some examples of what life's not fair looks like when it comes to divorce? Like, what are we talking about?
So, a lot of times it's very easy for people to look at who brought in what income during the marriage, what expenses were paid out, who those expenses benefited. But what's very difficult to measure is how responsibilities were shared during the marriage, right? So it may have fallen on one of the parties to take care of the house, to take care of the children, and they really contributed in a very meaningful way through those responsibilities, right? But when we go to look at how are we going to divide things, there's no measurement for all of that contribution, and that can feel very unfair.
Mhm.
It's also, people who take time away from the workforce really lose out on that career growth opportunity. So if one of the parties has been working, maybe both of the parties are working, but maybe one's more focused on their career and maybe one's more focused on the family and maybe given up some of those career growth opportunities. They're in a very different situation in terms of earnings capacity when they're going through this divorce, right? And that's not really taken into consideration. That is one of the benefits, though, I will say about mediation. And one of the things I love about mediation is people can really start to talk through some of these things. And depending where they're at, emotionally, sometimes people just can't see it. But sometimes people are really like, you know what, you really did do a lot. And I really do want to make sure that feel like you're receiving your fair share of assets or income or whatever the negotiation is. But that's certainly not, you're not going to get any of that going the litigation route at all.
Well, you bring up such a great point because the laws, there are different laws in different states for divorce, but for the most part, the laws are what could make things unfair.
Right.
Like for example, in Illinois, if you get married and your husband moves into your home, well, now that's become marital property. And by the way, I mean, can you tell I'm talking about my own situation? Well, then when we got divorced, guess who has to split half of the home with the soon to be ex? And
Right.
that felt really unfair to me. Now, there
I
were
bet.
some other things that I was like, okay, this is fair that he might not have thought were fair. But what I'm saying is, like Leah said, if you go through mediation, you're more likely to craft a divorce settlement that isn't exactly following the laws because you don't have to in mediation. You're following what the 2 of you think is fair and can live with.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
so many benefits to mediation.
So many. Let's move on to how you cope with when you feel like something's not fair, because I feel like when something's not fair, sometimes it's not about the money for me. It's just like I feel like I got screwed. And so let's talk about coping mechanisms. What do you tell people who are like, Leah, this just doesn't seem fair to me? What do you say? How do people cope?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that each individual's divorce experience is unique. And we can really get tied into this comparison-itis of, what other people are experiencing or what other people are seeing or what their results are. But when we can really focus on the unique challenges and, successes within our own divorce process, that can be really, really valuable. The other piece to that is, and this was something I really worked so hard at during my own divorce, Jackie, was really that mindset of looking at what he had going on or what he was doing with the kids and really focusing on being grateful. Grateful for my time, grateful for the things that I had. I had a time where I was just so hurt and struggling. And I remember I would write like my gratitude every day. And my son, Christopher, he's my youngest, gives these amazing, warm, loving hugs. And those
Oh,
hugs were like on my gratitude list almost every day. But
I
it's so,
love that.
yeah, but
Really
it's
getting back to basics. And you know
exactly.
that saying people say like, "Well, it could always be worse." That might people might think that's kind of a negative thing to say, but I view it as a positive because if you're talking about gratitude and you're saying to yourself, "Well, it could always be worse." That's true. What if God forbid something happened to your son? So I would think with those hugs, you would be thinking, he's healthy, he loves me, we have a great relationship. I get to look at his cute little face every day. And so when you go back to those basics, it's like life's not fair, but maybe that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it takes you out of that mindset of thinking about all these things that aren't fair when you're really focused on, what you have and what's meaningful to you and that sort of thing. But the other thing that I really like to see clients do, and especially when it comes to these income conversations, like I'm a financial professional, so we have lots of conversations around income and expenses and, various financial scenarios. And a lot of times there is one partner that is very envious of the other partner's ability to earn. And really turning that into action and looking at, okay, if I want to make more money, yes, maybe I can negotiate more child or spousal support, but long term, what can I do to either educate myself, prepare for a promotion, return to the workforce? There's all kinds of things that you can do to really bolster your income. But using those feelings and those emotions to get clear and take action and do something about it rather than just sit in that feeling.
Leah, do you know how many women I know who reinvented themselves and are doing things they never thought even possible? And they're like, wow, this feels like almost a dream because they did the work to empower themselves financially, really dig deep, whether that's through a divorce coach, therapist, whatever, to figure out what made them happy. They followed the path of happiness. They believed in themselves. They said, okay, I was a stay at home mom for a while, but hey, I'm only in my 40s, even 50s, even 60s. These women are reinventing themselves and making their own money so they don't have to sit around and wait for a child support check and be worried that it's not going to come and they're not going to be able to pay their bills. And Leah, there is nothing more satisfying and gratifying than that. And then you don't even care about what's fair or not.
That's right. That's right. You're feeling empowered and it doesn't matter.
Oh, I just love this conversation. I think we're helping so many people. So, Leah, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And if you like what you heard and you want to talk to Leah, consult with her, look at her website, go to intentionaldivorcesolutions.com. You can also find Leah in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Thanks so much for being here, everybody.